Mom on her own. Are you a temporary employee? That voice reverberated throughout my daughter, Mary's wedding reception. George, who would later become Mary's father-in-law, was the one who spoke. I had no money to make a scene here. Silently, I'm an office clerk, I replied. And the groom's family laughed, obviously mocking me. Nevertheless, I stood my ground because I couldn't let this special day for my daughter to be destroyed. Mom, let's go home. Mary stood up for me after witnessing me take abuse after insult. Her eyes had a determined expression. You're correct. But first, I have to do something. I took my phone out of my backpack and called someone. I'd like to close my $50 billion account. Tension immediately froze the room at those remarks. For Mary and myself, that was the turning point in our lives. Emily Johnson is my name. This year is my 60th birthday. It has been about 15 years since I started working as an office clerk for a corporation. My life is now in its second half. Every day I live with the hope that I will be able to live the remainder of my life in peace, leisurely and authentically. 20 years ago, my spouse and I got divorced. We got divorced because of his adultery. Ever since I became pregnant with our daughter Mary, he had been seeing someone else. Divorce was the only thing that sprung to mind after learning about his affair. I felt terrible for causing Mary to go through the anguish of losing her father so quickly. Mary and I have been the only ones supporting one another ever since. Mary is currently getting married. I was ecstatic to hear the news. It has always been my hope that she will create a happy home and avoid making the same mistakes that I did. In 2 weeks, Mary will get married. She has been quite busy with the preparations. She comes over to my house whenever she has a day off and enlists me to assist with the wedding preparations. I apologize for making you complete this task each and every week. Jake and I are simply overburdened. It's all right. Please let me know if I can be of any further assistance. Mary is employed by a large advertising firm. She is busier than ever since she was recently promoted to manager. Jake, her partner, is employed at a bank. He is the son of the president of one of the biggest banks in the area, Sunrise Bank. I nearly fell when I heard that because I was so surprised. Jake, who also works there and is the department head, puts his all into his work every day. As I watched Mary handle the wedding preparations with precision, I couldn't help but smile. It felt like just yesterday when I still thought of her as a child. But now she's a confident, mature woman. Mary has always been a hard worker. And more than anything, I want her to be happy. With those thoughts swirling in my mind, a mix of bittersweet pride and joy, the 2 weeks flew by, and soon it was the day of the wedding. I was more nervous than Mary, the bride herself. Today's finally here. Don't get so nervous. You're making me nervous too. Mary smiled awkwardly. I must have looked incredibly tense. The ceremony went smoothly, and then it was time for the reception. After arriving at the venue, I checked my seat and headed to my table. That's when I saw something unbelievable in front of me. There was supposed to be a name card with my name on it. However, the card in front of me read, "Single mom, old hag." I felt the blood drain from my face. Who would do something like this? It couldn't have been Mary or Jake. The wedding planner wouldn't do something so cruel either. Then who did it? As I glanced around the room, my eyes met those of Jake's parents, the Andersons. They watched me glance around nervously and grinned. Could it have been them? Before I could process my thoughts, the Andersons walked over to me. Well, is something wrong? This name card, did you guys do that? I forced myself to speak, my voice trembling as I questioned the Andersons. What about it? Isn't it the truth? They smiled as they spoke, their words dripping with mockery. The Andersons were an elite family, especially since George was the president of Sunrise Bank. I'd also heard that his wife, Ivan, had been very particular about their son's upbringing. Maybe they look down on single-parent families. As I tried to make sense of the situation, that conclusion became clear to me. Imagine choosing to marry into a family like her. Jake really is an odd one. There were so many better options for him, don't you think? The Andersons kept staring at me with smug, condescending grins. Before I knew it, I was surrounded by their relatives who were whispering insults and laughing quietly, as though I couldn't hear them. My vision went dark. I couldn't believe something like this was happening at my daughter's big day. I was overwhelmed with disbelief. I didn't care how much they looked down on me, but I couldn't stand seeing Mary being looked down on. Why would you do something like this? Why? Because you don't belong here. If you think you can build a good relationship with us, you're gravely mistaken. We don't accept you. They kept throwing harsh words at me, one after another. In short, the Andersons couldn't understand the fact that Mary and I came from a single-parent family. If that's how they felt, they didn't need to go to such elaborate lengths. They probably just enjoyed tormenting people. I endured it all because I didn't want to ruin the wedding. I quickly hid the name card that said single mom, old hag, so Mary wouldn't see it. Just then, the reception began. Know your place. With that parting shot, the Andersons returned to their seats. My heart was pounding, but I tried my best to focus and take in the sight of Mary in her wedding dress. The reception continued moving along, and after the performances, the guests began approaching the head table one after another to pour drinks and offer their congratulations. Among the crowd of well-wishers, the Andersons returned once more. With a sarcastic tone, they continued speaking to me. Emily, is it true that you're a single mom? You don't have a husband. That question was deliberate. I had already answered it clearly during the family meeting. They were asking just to make sure the people around us could hear. Yes, that's right. I wanted to avoid engaging with them, but I couldn't ignore the question altogether. George noticed my uncomfortable expression and said with a smirk, Single mom. You work as a temp. I'm an office clerk. Is that a problem? An office clerk. The Andersons suddenly started mocking me loudly, and I couldn't hide my confusion. The commotion was loud enough to reach the head table, and Mary looked over with a worried expression. The Anderson relatives around me kept glancing in my direction, whispering and looking down on me. The Anderson family was full of elites, and Harvard graduates were the norm. Their family included doctors, bankers, and politicians. They probably wanted to say that someone like me, a single mom working as an office clerk, had no place at this wedding. All I could do was endure it silently. I didn't want to ruin Mary's happiness, and my only goal was to protect her day. However, it seemed Mary had noticed what was happening. The eyes of the entire room began shifting from the head table to where we were. This was exactly what the Andersons wanted. They were trying to humiliate me in front of the wedding guests. I couldn't talk back. This was Mary's day. I told myself that as long as I could endure this, everything would be fine, and I held my ground. But my calm demeanor seemed to frustrate the Andersons more and more. Their words became harsher by the second. Well, I can't believe there are still single moms nowadays. How pathetic. Not even able to keep your family together. Well, I suppose you didn't receive much of an education anyway. With smug smiles, the Andersons continued to hurl cruel words at me. Their relatives nodded along, affirming the couple's cruel words. Sure, they might have received top-tier educations, but for all that, they were just a group of people looking down on others at such a joyous occasion. I couldn't help but wonder if their education even had any value. I sat there silently without responding. The reception would be over soon. All I had to do was endure until then. With a blank expression, I stood my ground, refusing to let my anger or sadness show. I couldn't let this wedding be ruined. Meanwhile, Ivan and George kept spewing insults. I can't believe a single-parent bride is joining our family. Maybe this marriage really was a mistake. The word mistake was unbearable, and I instinctively shot a glare at George. She probably didn't put much effort into her daughter's education, so this is the result. Evan threw that comment at me with a smug smile, clearly enjoying herself. What did you just say? That was something I couldn't ignore. I could tolerate being insulted, but not Mary. She is truly hardworking, never letting being from a single-parent family become a disadvantage, and she relentlessly pursues her dreams. I respect her deeply for that. I couldn't tolerate anyone speaking badly about Mary. My raised voice echoed through the room, and the entire venue fell silent. Mary must have realized what was happening. You can look down on me all you want, but I won't let you speak ill of Mary. The air in the room grew tense. The planners had probably never experienced anything like this before. They looked flustered, unsure of what to do. I couldn't help but wonder if Mary really got along with this kind of in-laws. Just as that thought filled me with words, I heard a voice behind me. Mom. I turned around at the sound of her voice, and there stood Mary. She must have noticed the Andersons throwing insults at me. She looked at me with a sad expression, but there was a glint of determination in her eyes. I knew exactly what Mary was thinking. But I also knew that her decision would mean calling off her marriage to Jake, and that was the one thing I couldn't bear to let happen. I just wanted Mary to be happy. If I could endure this, everything would be fine. Mary, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. This is your special day. Let's enjoy it. Okay. But all eyes in the room were now on me and Mary. The guests murmured among themselves, and the Andersons continued to wear smug, condescending smiles. Of course, I wasn't without inner conflict. A storm of doubts swirled in my mind. If I could just hold out, maybe Mary could continue with the marriage and be happy. But would she truly be happy becoming part of a family that looked down on others like this? As I gazed into Mary's eyes, memories of my life flitted back to me. I had been looked down upon many times simply for being a single mother. Each time, I felt discouraged, but I kept moving forward, because I had Mary. She never showed sadness over not having a dad, and always stayed cheerful, with a bright smile on her face. Mary's presence had always been my source of strength. I turned to George once more and spoke firmly. Yes, Mary is the daughter of a single mother, but she worked twice as hard as anyone to build the life she has today. I'm incredibly proud of her. You can look down on me all you want, but I will not tolerate anyone looking down on Mary. Oh, hard work? Let me tell you something. Your life is determined by the status you're born into. People from single-parent families like yours will always remain worthless, no matter what they do. George's merciless words hit me hard, but I clenched my fists and held back my emotions. Ivan and the other Anderson relatives giggled as if to agree with him. I've said what I needed to say. Now I just have to endure whatever comes next. I took a deep breath to calm myself. And that's when Mary spoke. Let's go home, Mom. Mary, what are you saying? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was her big day, her once-in-a-lifetime moment. I never imagined that the bride herself would walk away from her own wedding. Then Mary spoke again. There's something more important to me than my marriage, and that's my mom. So if I have to give up this marriage to protect her, then so be it. Mary. As I stood there in shock, Mary stepped in front of George and declared, We're calling off the wedding. I've been unsure for a long time, but now I've made up my mind. There's no way I could become part of your family. I knew it. A single mother's daughter amounts to nothing. To throw away the chance to be related to the Anderson family, you must be truly stupid. George sneered as he flung those words at Mary. Yvonne immediately chimed in. Well, I'm relieved that this bloodline won't be tainted. After all, there are far better women out there for Jake. Her words made my blood boil. But Mary, the one being insulted, looked remarkably calm. Oh, please, by all means. I'm sure a wife who will obey you without question would suit you much better. What? Who do you think you are? We're the Andersons. It felt like Yvonne's true feelings had finally slipped out. It was as if they were saying that marrying into a prestigious family was the key to a woman's happiness. No matter how prestigious a family may be, I can't become part of a family that doesn't treat my mom with respect. How dare you? George muttered in frustration. Even though they didn't want the blood of a single-parent family mixing with theirs, they were irritated that Mary wouldn't fall in line with their expectations. They were truly selfish people. Mary continued, "Yes, I had planned to go through with this marriage. I thought it would be the best way to show my gratitude to my mom. But I finally realized something. Staying with people like you wouldn't do me any good." "What did you just say?" George asked. Mary glared at George and Yvonne. "You heard me. It's pathetic. You look down on people from single-parent families without even trying to understand their struggles." Mary's words struck me right in the heart. I'm sure that Mary was never truly okay with being looked down on before either. She must have been holding it all in for my sake. I was overwhelmed with guilt. And another reason I'm calling off this marriage isn't just because of you. With those words, Mary turned toward Jake, the groom. Despite the chaos unfolding, he was still sitting at the head table, staring blankly into space. I don't need a husband who just sits there and watches as my mom and I are treated like this. What? Don't talk about Jake like that. It was Ivan who screamed hysterically. Mary let out a sigh of exasperation. Jake doesn't love me. I knew that all along. You told him, didn't you? Hurry up and produce an ear. That's why he reluctantly agreed to marry me. No, that's awful. I was so stunned by everything that had happened that those words escaped my lips. Mary had been trying her hardest to endure everything, no matter how cruel the situation. Criticism from the guests began to ripple through the room. What's so wrong about telling him to produce an heir for a prestigious family like ours? That's just common sense. George said it shamelessly, without a hint of remorse. Mary must have realized she couldn't be part of a family with such a mindset. That's exactly why you should find a woman who shares that mindset to marry Jake. If I married him, I wouldn't have any hope for my career anyway. Mary's voice was calm, but her expression was icy. It was the look she had when she was truly furious. Isn't that right, Jake? Mary called out to him loudly. Jake, still in shock, finally stood up from the head table. What did I do? This is too much. It was hard to believe those were the words of someone who was supposed to be a responsible adult about to get married. You didn't do anything. That's the problem. You never did anything for me. You didn't even love me, did you? Jake was at a loss for words in response to Mary. Anyway, we're leaving. Encouraged by Mary's unwavering resolve, I stood up as well. In that moment, I had already decided on my next move. I slowly looked around at every member of the Anderson family and muttered, "What a shame. I was planning to build a strong relationship with you, both personally and professionally." Personally and professionally? What are you talking about? George muttered with a confused expression. They would soon come to regret not understanding the meaning behind those words. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and made a call. Hello, Sunrise Bank? Yes, I'd like to close my $50 billion account. I could see the color drain from George's face as he heard my words. Wait, $50 billion. The room grew silent as the surrounding guests stopped talking and turned their attention to us. After finishing my call, I locked eyes with George. What a pity things turned out this way. Both my daughter and I had planned to foster a positive relationship with your family. George's mouth opened and closed wordlessly, as though he couldn't comprehend what I had just said. What do you mean? You're just a single mom working as an office clerk. There's no way you could have $50 billion. And what if I told you I do? This time, Mary spoke in my place. Yes, I may be just an office clerk now, but I used to run my own company. I had founded a marketing firm, married my ex-husband, and welcomed Mary into my life. My days were fulfilling, both personally and professionally, but life doesn't always stay sweet forever. A few years later, the company went bankrupt due to financial struggles. Around that time, I discovered that my ex-husband, who had stopped coming home often, was having an affair. With my career gone and my marriage falling apart, we ended up divorcing. My life spiraled downward all at once. But I didn't give up. Instead, I'd immediately decided to use my remaining assets to start investing. As a result, my wealth steadily grew, and now I also have a role as an investor. The one managing my assets is Sunrise Bank. When I first learned that Mary's future father-in-law was the president of the bank, I was surprised. But I took it as a twist of fate. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine he would look down on me like this at his son's wedding. Seeing that George still couldn't grasp the situation, I spoke again with finality. I have a $50 billion account with your Sunrise Bank, but as of today, I'll be closing it. The room erupted into murmurs of shock and disbelief. George's mouth hung open, as if he'd seen something impossible. What are we supposed to do now? No, this can't be. I don't believe it. George muttered to himself, repeating the words like a broken record. At the head table, Jake had gone completely pale. Yes, we're a single-parent family. But with enough effort, you can rise above any circumstances. However, your words have been deeply disappointing. We can't continue any kind of relationship with you. Neither Mary nor I. The reason I had the strength to take this stand was because of Mary. She taught me the courage to speak up against those who hurt us. Mary truly is the daughter I'm so proud of. And I have no intention of ever doing business with you again. Wait, please. George finally seemed to grasp the meaning of my words and frantically tried to stop me. We sincerely apologize for the offense. Please, let's find a way to continue our business relationship. The president of a major bank begged for forgiveness. Jake couldn't hide his shocked expression at the sight of George's desperation. He had probably never seen his father beg anyone before. George's sudden shift in attitude was so blatant that even Mary was too stunned to speak. What are you talking about? It's too late. What's been said can't be taken back. Your words hurt both Mary and me. We deeply regret what happened. Please allow us to make a formal apology. George, I couldn't bear it any longer and spoke quietly. Even in this moment, I could see how deeply ingrained their condescension was. I couldn't help but feel a surge of anger. More than anything, I couldn't forgive the fact that Mary had been hurt by this family. Once you lose someone's trust, it's nearly impossible to regain it. You all claim to be Ivy graduates, yet you don't seem to understand something that's simple. How disappointing. And shouldn't you be apologizing to Mary, not to me? Silence. George lowered his head, his face full of frustration, unable to say a word. $50 billion. What am I supposed to do? I watched George with a calm, cold gaze. I felt no guilt. He had brought this upon himself. Even without this wedding, this day of reckoning would have come sooner or later. I hoped this would make him reflect, though I knew better than anyone that people like him don't change easily. Let's go, Mary. When I called out to her, Mary smiled and followed me. The planner, who had witnessed everything, guided Mary to the waiting room to help her change out of her dress. Jake just sat there, watching the entire scene unfold. It was unsettling to think that someone so passive was serving as a department head at Sunrise Bank. He had likely coasted through life on the strength of his father's connections. The thought almost made me pity him. The Anderson family would probably remain unchanged, unaware as people slowly distanced themselves from them. I couldn't imagine living a life like that. I sincerely apologized to our family members who came to support us and explain the situation, thanking them as they prepared to leave. Of course, I made sure to return their wedding gifts. Most of the guests had witnessed everything, so they left understanding the situation. After seeing off the last guest, Mary and I left the venue as well. Shortly after, I withdrew the $50 billion from my account and cut all ties with Sunrise Bank and the Anderson family. Starting the very next day, George and Jake came to my house daily to apologize. But of course, I had no intention of meeting them. Despite being ignored repeatedly, they continued showing up every day, pressing the doorbell over and over again. It was obvious that their apologies weren't out of genuine remorse for their actions, but rather an attempt to save the bank's reputation. Knowing that made me even more determined not to see them. When they grew desperate from being unable to get a response, they resorted to sitting in front of my house, waiting for me to come outside. It was clear they had no respect for others whatsoever. Completely fed up, I called the police and had them removed. Word of Sunrise Bank's disgrace at the wedding spread quickly, and they began losing the trust of their major clients and business partners one by one. News of George's incompetence as bank president spread throughout the industry, causing Sunrise Bank's reputation to plummet. Due to the decline in the bank's credibility, its stock price plummeted in the market. Investors seemed to agree with the assessment of the bank's management and began selling off their shares. Investors are highly sensitive to even the slightest changes. They quickly sensed that something had happened at Sunrise Bank and began reassessing its value. As a result, the bank's capital strength declined significantly, making its financial situation increasingly dire. The sudden withdrawal of major clients led to an audit being conducted at Sunrise Bank. The investigation into the bank's situation revealed that Sunrise Bank was incapable of independently restructuring itself. Additionally, its opaque management practices came to light, further cornering the Anderson family. The Anderson family's beliefs and self-centered decision-making, which had triggered the conflict with me, became the subject of widespread gossip in the financial industry. Voices calling for the resignation of the leadership grew louder, and the Andersons completely lost control of the bank's management. With the bank's management deteriorating, George and Jake were forced to step down, taking responsibility for this situation. It was effectively a dismissal in disgrace. Having treated others arrogantly for so long, no one extended a helping hand to them when things fell apart. Less than 2 months after the scandalous wedding, both Jake and George found themselves unemployed. Of course, this incident became a major topic within the industry, and the Anderson family was branded as a disgraced dynasty of failed executives. Even after the Andersons were ousted from the bank's management, Sunrise Bank's financial situation showed no signs of improvement and remained dire. The remaining options were either to be absorbed by another major bank or to restructure on a smaller scale. In the end, Sunrise Bank was absorbed by a larger financial institution. The brand name that the Anderson family had once boasted about so proudly vanished, marking the end of its once storied history. They completely disappeared from the financial industry after that. The Anderson family continued to decline until they became a shadow of their former selves. Since much of their wealth had been tied to the bank's management, the collapse of Sunrise Bank caused their assets to dwindle significantly. Even when they tried to start new ventures, they couldn't escape the widespread bad reputation they had earned in the financial world. And with their history of arrogance, it was unthinkable that anyone would hire them. They began living modestly, slowly spending what little remained of their assets without any luxuries. After leaving the wedding early, Mary and I visited each of our relatives to personally apologize. Everyone offered us kind words, and their support became a source of strength for us. Mom, maybe my decision wasn't wrong after all. Seeing Mary's eyes sparkle as she said that filled me with joy as well. The Andersons could never tear apart the bond between Mary and me. We had overcome so many hardships together. People like them, who couldn't even begin to imagine such struggles, could never truly be our family. It was clear we could never be family with people like that. Mary had planned to register her marriage to Jake after the wedding, but instead, she ended up breaking things off and staying single until the very end. Jake seemed clueless about the gravity of the situation, leaving Mary so exasperated that she couldn't help but vent about it. We both felt it was a relief to finally cut ties with Jake for good. Afterward, we decided to take our vacation to put the events of the wedding behind us. It had been a long time since Mary and I had traveled together. We hadn't had the chance to relax and enjoy each other's company like this in ages, and I was grateful for the time we finally had to just unwind. Thank you, Mom. I lost count of how many times Mary whispered those words during our trip. But if anyone should be thankful, it's me. The wedding incident may have been painful, but we overcame it together. I felt our bond as mother and daughter grow even stronger. Marry someone you truly love. Your happiness is the greatest gift you can give me. You don't need to force yourself to be dutiful for my sake. I shared with Mary what I had learned from this whole experience. Mary had always been a kind and thoughtful child. She had almost thrown her life away just to be a good daughter to me. I'm truly glad she didn't end up marrying into the Anderson family. Thanks, Mom. But I still plan to make you proud in my own way. Her words made me smile. I felt so grateful to be her mother. We enjoyed our week-long vacation to the fullest, but we also came up with a plan during our time away. We decided to start a business together. Mary and I had always talked about starting a company that sells souvenirs from all over the country. But back then, we were both too busy to take the idea seriously, especially with Mary preparing for her wedding to Jake. She had no time for anything else. After cutting ties with the Andersons, Mary said, "I want a fresh start and to do something new." That's when I suggested the idea of us co-running a business. When I brought it up, Mary was immediately on board, and things progressed quickly. If we're going to do this, now's the time. You're right. It feels like the perfect time. With my experience running a company in the past, and Mary's background working at a major advertising agency, I believe that by combining our strengths, we could overcome any challenge in business as well. Mary seemed to have gained confidence from overcoming this experience. And so, we went on to establish our company. A few years later, the business we started together is thriving, and our team has grown steadily. Everyone in the company feels like family. Mary also found a new partner, a wonderful person who treats her with love and respect. They're planning to get married next year. He's nothing like Jake. In fact, I'm certain he'll make Mary truly happy. Mary's radiant smile as she talks about her future makes me feel overjoyed as well. Our family is growing, and as we cherish and support each other, I know we'll continue to live a happy and fulfilling life. Your methodology is antiquated, Eli. Marcus Thorne slid a single sheet of paper over the large, glossy surface of his desk and pronounced the words with a fluidity that had been practiced. It wasn't a notice of termination, something much more offensive. Elijah Cole is my name. I am 52 years old, and up until now, I oversaw all regional operations for Apex Industrial Solutions as head of safety. Mine was the first time in my 30 years in my sector that I had been disciplined for carrying out my duties with honesty. I nodded slowly and thoughtfully. As a silent protest against the sterile, untreated wood, I removed the hard hat that felt like a part of me and laid it gently on his desk. The office of the plant manager was made of cold steel and glass, with a subtle scent of pricey air freshener. I could see the plant's expansive center through the floor-to-ceiling window behind him. On the catwalks close to the main turbines, I could see the young technicians. They were traveling at a speed that I instinctively knew was the result of taking shortcuts. "Aren't you going to say anything?" Marcus, who exuded corporate ease by reclining in his ergonomic chair, asked. However, I noticed a tiny trembling in the hand that was holding his pen, which cost $1,000. The unquantifiable variable of a man who might just tell him to go to hell frightened him. He was a man who lived by spreadsheets and projections. I pushed myself to stand up and said, "There's nothing to say, Marcus," in a firm voice. "I'll clear out my office." There was a glint of disappointment in his eyes as he appeared surprised. Arguments are what men like Marcus thrive on. To support their icy calculations, they require the war. You leave them alone with the silent reality of their choices when you deny them that battle. He began by saying, "Look, Eli," his voice changing to one of artificial rationality. "This isn't personal. Simply put, our approaches to risk management in a competitive environment differ. Your method is meticulous, but our goals call for a more flexible strategy." With a tight, controlled motion, I nodded again. "I understand." After that, I turned away from him and left the glass prison. A symphony of controlled power filled the manufacturing floor. The concrete beneath my feet trembled with the heavy hum of the generators. The air was heavy with the smell of hot metal and ozone. Here, good men worked. At the end of each shift, skilled engineers and technicians who loved their families should be able to return home intact. Men who now worked next to emergency shutoffs partially blocked by hurriedly stored equipment and near-pressure pipes with gauges circumvented. For the purpose of a deadline, that is. With sadness, I cleared out my workplace. The shelves of safety instructions I knew by heart, my spare steel-toed boots, and the battered work gloves. I carefully removed the pictures of my daughter, grinning on her first day of college, and my wife and I on our anniversary from the corkboard. 3 decades of showing up, of doing the work the right way, of ensuring every single person made it home. And Marcus Thorne had been sent from headquarters less than 3 months ago. As I walked toward the parking lot with a single box of my life's work, Liam, one of my best young technicians, hurried to catch up. "Eli, is it true?" he asked, his voice low. "About what Marcus did?" "He's reassigning me." I stated the fact without emotion, placing my box in the passenger seat of my old pickup. "He calls it a transfer to the historical archives." "That's just wrong, Eli," Liam said, his frustration clear. "It's a punishment because you wouldn't sign off on the Project Chenra shortcuts. What are you going to do?" I paused and looked back at the massive facility, at the men working under a false sense of security, at the risks being taken that would sooner or later demand a price in flesh and blood. I saw Marcus watching me from his window high above, a silhouette of detached authority. "Well, I should have started a month ago," I said. "I came to Apex right out of engineering school. I learned the systems from the ground up. From calibrating sensors to designing safety interlocks, I worked my way up with honesty and diligence. When I was 25, a young man full of ambition, I watched a dear friend and colleague die. He was killed in a flash explosion because a supervisor chasing a production bonus ordered a pressure test on a system that hadn't been properly cleared. That supervisor's name is lost to time, but my friend's face is something I see every single day. So, when I finally became a safety chief, I made a vow. Everyone goes home. Apex hired me into this senior role 5 years ago to fix their safety culture after a string of incidents damaged their reputation. And I did. I implemented protocols that worked, training that saved lives, and a culture of trust. The company's incident rate plummeted. Productivity and morale soared. It turns out that people are more efficient when they aren't afraid of being maimed or killed. Then came Project Chimera. A massive upgrade. A punishing schedule. And with it came Marcus Thorne, the MBA from corporate sent to make sure the numbers worked. The first week he was all smiles and called me the conscience of the company. But the condescension was there from the start. By week 2, the real questions began. "Eli, do the metrics truly support daily inspections on these valves? The statistical probability of failure is an infinite decimal. This secondary containment system seems redundant. Surely our technicians are competent enough to handle these catalysts without it. Can we expedite the turbine startup sequence by bypassing the preliminary sensor checks? We're behind schedule." Each time, I would patiently explain the regulations. More than that, I explained the why behind them. The accidents they prevented, the lives they protected. With every explanation, his smile grew tighter, his gaze more dismissive. The breaking point was a morning briefing where I heard him tell my team to leverage operational efficiencies to meet the new impossible milestone. It was corporate speak for cut whatever corners you need to. I waited until the others had left and closed the door to the conference room. You can't encourage them to bypass safety procedures, I said, keeping my voice level. I didn't, he retorted, his eyes flashing with irritation. I empowered them to be innovative and results-oriented. Those procedures are what keep them alive, Marcus. He actually let out a short, sharp laugh. Come on, Eli. You've been around long enough to know the game. We write the safety reports to look good for the regulators and the board. But on the floor, we do what it takes to hit the numbers. Not on my watch. And that's the core of the problem. His voice turned to ice. You think this is still your watch? After that conversation, I began to build a file. I took pictures with my phone of the block shutoffs, the bypassed gauges, the faulty warning lights. I made detailed notes of every conversation where he advocated for a dangerous shortcut, documenting the specific federal and state codes being violated. I saved copies of my formal emails expressing these concerns, all of which were met with polite, dismissive replies. My wife Sarah knew something was deeply wrong. You're not sleeping well, she said one evening, her hand resting on my arm. It's just work. Is it bad? She asked, her eyes full of concern. I could only nod. It's getting there. The final confrontation happened on a Tuesday morning. I came in at dawn to run a system check on the primary cooling loop for Reactor 3. I found two of the youngest technicians, including Owen, who just had a new baby, working on a high-pressure valve with the main lockout-takeout system completely bypassed. They were one wrong turn a wrench away from a catastrophic failure. I shut the operation down instantly and had them begin the procedure again, the right way, the safe way. Marcus stormed onto the floor while I was personally verifying the new lockout. What in God's name is this, Cole? Why is my team standing around? They were working on a live system without a proper lockout, I said, my voice dangerously calm. They are now following the correct and legal procedure. We are already 24 hours behind on this phase, he hissed, his face reddening. The board is expecting an update. Then the board will be glad to know we averted a potential disaster that would have put this entire plant offline for months. He stepped right up to me, invading my personal space. I understand you have your comfort zone, your old way of doing things, he said, his voice a low growl. But Apex can't afford to have its progress dictated by an outdated zero-risk mentality. I stopped what I was doing and turned to face him fully. Zero-risk mentality. This is a federally mandated safety protocol. It's a protocol for inspectors, he sneered. Be a team player for once, Eli. In that moment, a cold clarity washed over me. I had been trying to reason with him, to appeal to a sense of decency. I now realized he utterly lacked it. He wasn't ignorant of the risks. He simply didn't care. Those are my men over there, I said quietly, the anger in me a low, steady burn. Owen has a newborn daughter. They trust me to make sure they see their families again. They're professionals. They are responsible for their own safety. I stared at him, truly seeing the void behind his eyes for the first time. That is not how this works. That is not how any of this works. Look, he sighed, trying one last time to sound reasonable. Just sign off on the abbreviated procedure for this one instance. I'll take full responsibility in my report. No, you won't, I said, the words flat and final. You'll blame them. Or you'll blame me. You'll blame whoever is most convenient for your career. His face hardened into a mask of cold fury. Is that a refusal to follow a direct managerial instruction? It is a refusal to falsify a critical safety document. Yes. He held my gaze for a long second. Then we have a serious problem. I nodded, the truth of it settling in my bones. Yes, Marcus, we do. That afternoon, I compiled all my evidence, the photos, the logs, the unanswered emails, and filed a formal request for an internal safety audit, citing gross negligence under Project Chimera. I sent it directly to the Chief Compliance Officer at headquarters. The response was a deafening silence. The next morning, I was summoned to Marcus's office and given my new assignment in the archives. As I drove home from the plant, the initial shock gave way to a strange and profound calm. There was no more conflict raging inside me, no more trying to fix a system that was designed to be broken. The path forward was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my truck for a long moment, looking at the home Sarah and I had built, the life we had made through hard, honest work. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I now knew I should have called weeks ago. Federal Safety and Workplace Bureau. How can I direct your call? My name is Elijah Cole, I said, my voice firm. I need to report a series of willful and systemic safety violations at an Apex Industrial Solutions plant. I can assist you with that, sir, the operator replied. Can you describe the nature of the alleged violations? I have digital documentation, photographic evidence, dates, names, and a record of management actively ordering these violations. There was a brief pause followed by the rapid sound of typing. Are you a current employee at this facility, Mr. Cole? No, I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. I was effectively removed from my duties this morning for refusing to falsify a safety inspection. I see. The operator's voice became sharper, more focused. In that case, sir, please hold. I'm transferring you to our Office of Special Investigations. An investigator will want to take your statement immediately. The FSWB investigator, a woman named Eva Roth, met me in a small, discreet cafe the following morning. She was sharp and focused, her expression serious. She placed a small digital recorder on the table between us, her notebook already open. Mr. Cole, please walk me through the timeline from the beginning, she said, her tone professional but not unkind. I told her everything. The arrival of Marcus, the shift in company culture from safety to speed, the specific documented violations under Project Chimera, the internal audit request that was ignored, and the punitive reassignment that followed. And you have all of this evidence compiled? She asked, her eyes intent. I slid a small encrypted flash drive across the table. Every photo is timestamped and geotagged. Every email is there. I also have audio memos I dictated to myself after every critical conversation with Marcus. It's all organized. She took the drive and secured it in her briefcase. This is an extraordinarily well-documented case, Mr. Cole. I've spent my entire life in this industry, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I know what happens when men like Marcus are allowed to gamble with other people's lives. She nodded, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. We will begin a preliminary review immediately. Our whistleblower protections are robust, which means Apex cannot legally retaliate against you. She paused, seeing the grim look on my face. But they already have, haven't they? They demoted me before I officially filed this report with you, I explained. It muddies the waters. Not necessarily, she countered. The statutes also protect those who raise internal safety concerns. We should definitely open a parallel inquiry into retaliatory action. She gave me her card, which listed her as a special investigator for the OSI. For now, stay quiet. We will likely move to conduct an unannounced inspection within the week. We may need you to confirm some details when that happens. I left the cafe feeling a profound sense of relief. The gears of justice were finally turning. The system was going to work. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Liam. Eli, you need to hear this, he said, his voice hushed and urgent. Marcus held a plant-wide meeting this morning after you left. He told everyone you were reassigned pending an investigation into data mismanagement. He said you were improperly accessing and distributing proprietary company files. A cold dread washed over me. That's a complete fabrication. Of course it is, and anyone who really knows you knows that. But he's building a narrative, Eli. He said that anyone found communicating with you about company matters would be implicated in the investigation. He's trying to poison the well and intimidate any witnesses. I murmured, the strategy becoming sickeningly clear. It gets worse, Liam continued. He had some lawyer from corporate give a presentation about protecting company assets and the legal penalties for sharing trade secrets. They're making everyone sign updated, more restrictive non-disclosure agreements. After I hung up, my hands were shaking with a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. I immediately called Investigator Roth to update her. She listened without interruption, a heavy silence on her end of the line. This accelerates everything, she said finally, her voice strained. This is active, overt obstruction. We're moving the inspection up. We'll go in tomorrow. But just an hour later, she called me back, and the frustration in her voice was palpable. We've hit a wall, Mr. Cole. A major one. Apex's legal team has filed a preemptive counter-complaint against you with the Bureau. They're accusing you of corporate espionage, claiming you stole confidential design schematics and operational data. They are demanding the return of all stolen assets before they will consent to any on-site inspection. That's not how the FSWD is supposed to operate, I said, my heart sinking. No, it's not, she agreed, the anger in her voice barely concealed. But they have friends in Washington. Someone with influence is putting their thumb on the scale to slow this down. So what does this mean for the investigation? It means we have to fight them through legal channels, and that will take time. Weeks, maybe months. They're also submitting falsified reports claiming that all the potential safety issues you flagged have already been remediated, which makes our job of proving willful negligence much harder. I ended the call and sat at my kitchen table, the silence of the house pressing in on me. Marcus wasn't just defending himself. He was methodically discrediting me, turning me from a whistleblower into a criminal. My phone buzzed. It was an encrypted message from a source I didn't recognize, but I knew it had to be no. They're scrubbing the logs, running a massive data cleanup overnight, altering historical maintenance records. Just wanted you to know. They were digitally erasing the past. By the time any investigator ever set foot in that plant, it would be a fiction, a perfectly compliant illusion. Marcus wasn't just trying to save himself. He was ensuring that the deadly risks would remain, buried under layers of lies, waiting for the next person to pay the price. The next morning, I drove to a small park near the industrial district where some of the off-shift techs sometimes ate lunch. As I'd hoped, I found Liam, Noah, and Owen at a secluded picnic table. They waved me over, their expressions a mixture of concern and defiance. Should you guys be seen with me? I asked as I sat down. This could cost you your jobs. Liam gave a humorless laugh. We're on a public bench on our own time. Besides, they can't fire the entire technical staff. They're running a full court press back there, Eli, Noel said, leaning in. It's an army of id consultants optimizing our data, they call it. They're fixing everything you ever wrote a report about, Owen added, looking nervous. It's like they're following your list as a guide. So, they're admitting in their own way that every single one of my concerns was valid, I said bitterly. They just refused to act until they got caught. Owen, the young father, fidgeted with his phone. There's more, Eli. I was near the admin offices yesterday, and I heard Marcus on a conference call. He was talking about you. He said they needed to dig into your entire work history, find anything they could use to neutralize the threat. A chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air went down my spine. They're not just defending, they're attacking. I don't think this is just Marcus anymore, Liam said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. I think this goes all the way to the top. What makes you say that? He exchanged a look with Noah, who nodded. Noah pulled a small, nondescript tablet from his backpack, powered it on, and slid it over to me. On the screen was a forwarded email chain. The subject line read, Project Chimera, Aggressive Timeline Implementation. The body of the lead email was chillingly direct. The board has signed off on the revised schedule. Standard safety protocols can be adjusted as operationally necessary to achieve the Q4 completion target. All official documentation must reflect full and unwavering compliance irrespective of field-level modifications. The Chimera model, if successful, will become the new standard for all future Apex projects. A revised executive bonus structure is attached. The sender's name was at the bottom. Silas Blackwood, the founder and CEO of Apex Industrial Solutions. Where did you get this? I asked, my voice hoarse. Marcus is arrogant, Noel said quietly. He stays logged into the main server on his office desktop. I was running a diagnostic nearby and happened to see his inbox. I stared at the screen, the pieces of the puzzle falling into a sickeningly clear picture. This wasn't a single manager's ambition. This was a deliberate top-down corporate strategy written in black and white. They were beta testing a plan to sacrifice safety for profit on Project Chimera, with the intent to roll it out across the entire company. Q4 is impossible, I breathed. That's a full quarter ahead of any realistic safe schedule. That's why they sent Marcus, Liam said grimly. He's the guy they call when they need the impossible done, and they don't care how he does it. He delivers the results, and he's an expert at making sure someone else takes the fall if it all goes sideways, Owen added. I handed the tablet back to Noel, my mind racing. Has he done this before? The three of them looked at each other, a silent, grim understanding passing between them. There are stories, Owen said finally, about the Olympia gas plant project. A few years back, there was a major incident, an explosion. A good engineer, a friend of one of our senior guys, was killed. The lead engineer on the project took all the blame, Liam added. They said he was negligent, that he cut corners. The company buried him. Word was the real problem was faulty equipment and a rushed timeline, but he was blacklisted from the industry. He had to change careers completely. I pulled out my phone and made a note. Olympia gas plant project. I need to find that engineer. What's the plan, Eli? Liam asked, his face etched with worry. Owen chimed in. They're erasing all the evidence. They're painting you as a criminal. My brother-in-law is in HR. He said they're building a termination file on you that claims you were stealing and selling company secrets for months. I looked at these three men. Good, brave men who just wanted to be safe at their jobs. They were risking everything to sit here with me. They were being endangered every day by executives in a boardroom 1,000 miles away. I'm not sure of the whole plan yet, I said, my voice low but steady. But I know one thing. What they're doing isn't just a violation. It's a conspiracy. And it's not about Marcus Thorne anymore. This is about Silas Blackwood and the entire company he built. Driving home, the anger and fear began to coalesce into a cold, hard purpose. I couldn't just expose the dangers of Project Chimera. That wasn't enough. I had to expose the entire rotten system, from the boardroom to the plant floor. To do that, I needed more than just data logs and pictures. I needed a human story. I needed evidence they couldn't scrub from a server. And I knew exactly where I had to look for it. The next important step was to track down Leo Martinez, the engineer who had been blamed for the Olympia gas plant project. His record was sealed, and the official channels were a dead end. However, Apex provided a private online community for its retirees, where they could connect and exchange stories. I meticulously crafted a post over the course of 2 days, posing a general question of the Olympia project as an academic inquiry into engineering issues. I received a private message a day later. You're posing risky queries. Let's talk if you're serious. It came from a former maintenance manager who had faith in Leo. A little auto repair business in a forgotten town in rural Idaho was the new name and location he told me. The high-tech realm of engineering was a planet away. I set up a private video call for us to meet. I could hardly recognize Leo from the old business photo I had located when his face came up on my screen. The intelligent, self-assured engineer had vanished, to be replaced by a guy who appeared to be haunted. His face was so deeply engraved with fatigue that it seemed to be permanent. "I appreciate you talking to me, Leo," I said. "Wasn't sure I was going to answer the call," he said in a gruff voice. "Apex Industrial isn't the name I like to hear." "I fully comprehend. Up until last week, I served as their safety chief." His eyes narrowed slightly, clouded by past pain. You were kicked off a big project for voicing safety concerns." "Let me guess," he continued, his lips forming a sour, sardonic smirk. "Does the name Marcus Thorne mean anything to you?" He only needed my nod as proof. The common experience served as a bridge of treachery between us. "He's using the same playbook, Leo," I said, "just on a new victim." I couldn't see the recollection he gazed upon as he looked past his screen. "They'll destroy you. That's his specialty, you know. You'll be a radioactive target in the industry after he's finished. A phony. A liar. A man who put his coworkers in jeopardy." I retorted, "Only if I stand by and let him. I'm not watching. I'm defending myself, and I think you can assist me." His laugh seemed hollow. "Aid you? How?" I made an effort to fight. I submitted reports. I spoke with an attorney. Nobody would pay attention. They declare it a tragic accident after one man dies. The legal department at Apex is as large as a small army. "But it wasn't just a tragic accident, was it?" I asked quietly. "Your project wasn't the only one. There was a pattern." As he struggled with ghosts, he fell silent, and the silence lasted for a full minute. "No," he finally answered, his voice hardly audible above a whisper. "It wasn't." Leo spilled the beans over the course of the following hour, explaining how Marcus had been brought in to speed up the Olympia project, how the pressure increased every day, how his written complaints concerning hurried inspections and poor quality supplies were often disregarded, and how Marcus had already created a dossier of fabricated reports and inspection sign-offs bearing Leo's name when a crucial valve broke and resulted in the explosion that killed his closest friend. Leo adamantly stated, "I never signed those papers," his voice breaking with 10 years of repressed pain and rage. My signature was falsified. However, they acted so quickly that I was fired before I could really comprehend what had happened. In the news, I was the bad guy. The family of one of my friends sued me for wrongful death, not Apex. "Did you keep anything?" With my heart racing, I inquired. "Any records, emails, anything at all?" He paused, his eyes averting. I tried to forget for a long time. All I was attempting to do was get by and rebuild my life. However, before they shut me out, I made a backup of my work computer. Everything. Everything is on an old hard drive that sits on my desk. I never gave it another glance. He said, "There's one more thing," in a very low voice. The director and Marcus gave us the instruction to utilize the less expensive, uncertified valves during the last project meeting. It seemed crazy to me. To protect myself, I activated my phone's speech recorder. The entire meeting is on audio for me. My throat tightened each breath. The one piece of evidence they would never be able to remove was the smoking gun. "That recording alters everything, Leo. Are you going to tell me? Put that together with the proof I have." He searched my face as he gazed at me through the screen. With obvious weariness in his voice, he questioned, "For what?" "FSWB is a farce. They have no teeth. For men like Thorne and Blackwood, the system is biased." Decisively, "I'm not going to the FSWB," I declared. "No longer. I'm thinking more broadly. If we can demonstrate that there is a pattern of illegal activity orchestrated by the company's highest level. There was a flare of brightness in Leo's eyes that I had assumed had been extinguished years before. You're talking about a criminal conspiracy. I nodded slowly. Willful violation of federal safety laws resulting in a death is a felony. With your audio file and my documentation, we can prove a pattern of racketeering. This goes beyond fines and sanctions. This is about putting the men responsible in prison. The Department of Justice, he whispered. For the first time since the call began, a spark of the old defiant engineer returned to his face. You honestly believe we can make this stick? I can't do it alone, I said, putting all the conviction I felt into my voice. I need your evidence, Leo, and I need your voice. He was silent for a long, heavy moment. They took my career, he said, the words heavy with loss. They took my friend. They took my name. His jaw tightened with a resolve that had been buried for 10 years. Tell me exactly what you need me to do. For the next week, I lived and breathed the case. Leo overnighted me the hard drive, and I worked relentlessly, weaving his evidence from the Olympia project together with my own from Project Chimera. I created a damning, irrefutable timeline of corporate malfeasance. I reached out through the retiree forums and, with Leo's help, found 2 other engineers who had been pushed out under similar circumstances. They were afraid, but Leo's courage gave them courage. They agreed to provide sworn affidavits. Meanwhile, Liam kept feeding the updates. The cover-up at the plant was complete. But Marcus, overconfident, was already pushing the crews to cut new corners, creating new dangers. The monster was still hungry. On Friday morning, 2 weeks after my reassignment, I submitted the entire case file. Hundreds of pages of documents, photos, affidavits, and one damning audio file to the Department of Justice's online portal for reporting industrial and corporate crime. The system was automated. I hit submit, and the package vanished into the digital ether. For 3 days, there was only silence. Then, on Monday morning, I got a call from a Washington, D.C. number. It was a lead prosecutor from the DOJ's criminal division. They had the file. They had listened to the tape. They were taking it seriously. The wheels of a much bigger, more powerful machine were beginning to turn. The raid didn't happen at the plant. It happened a week later at 10:00 a.m. on a Tuesday. It happened at the Gleaming Glass and Steel Apex Industrial Solutions corporate headquarters in Seattle. According to the news reports, a team of 24 agents from the FSW's Office of Special Investigations and the FBI stormed the executive floor. They served a federal warrant in the middle of a quarterly board meeting. I imagined the scene with grim satisfaction. The shock on the faces of the polished board members, the sudden, panicked powerlessness of Silas Blackwood as he realized his carefully constructed world was collapsing. And Marcus Thorne, the golden boy, the ruthless implement, his face turning to ash as he was rid his rights. Investigators, armed with a precise list I had helped create, seized specific servers from the data center. They took every computer from the executive suite. They knew exactly what they were looking for, because Leo and I had given them the map. I didn't need to be there to see it. The system, the real system, was finally working. 3 months later, I sat in a spacious corner office looking at the architectural plans for a new state-of-the-art manufacturing facility. As the new vice president of safety for the firm that had acquired Apex's non-toxic assets after its bankruptcy, I had the final say on every safety protocol for all their new projects. My phone buzzed with a news alert. A small, tight smile touched my lips as I read the headline. Apex executives, including CEO Silas Blackwood, indicted on federal racketeering and manslaughter charges. The article detailed a sweeping federal indictment. Blackwood, Marcus, and 3 other executives faced a battery of criminal charges: conspiracy, falsification of records, obstruction of justice, and most importantly, criminal negligence leading to the death of an employee at the Olympia gas plant. If convicted, they were all facing significant time in federal prison. The company was gone, its name a permanent stain on the industry. Leo Martinez had been publicly and completely exonerated. The settlement he received from the Apex bankruptcy estate would allow him to live comfortably for the rest of his life. But more than the money, he had his name back. My phone rang. It was Liam. He was now the lead safety engineer at my new company's largest plant. "Did you see the news, Eli?" he asked, his voice filled with a triumphant energy. "I just saw it. They're saying that the Project Chimera upgrades have to be completely torn down and rebuilt. The structural and safety flaws were too deep to fix." There was a deep satisfaction in his voice. "Some might call that karma. I just call it the cost of doing things the wrong way," I replied. After we hung up, I walked to the large window overlooking the site of our new project. I saw teams of workers moving with a quiet confidence that comes from a safe, well-organized environment. Every safety rail was in place. Every piece of equipment was up to code. Every person on that site was properly trained and protected. No one would be asked to cut a corner. No one would be forced to choose between their job and their life. I didn't need to see Marcus Thorne in a prison jumpsuit to feel the victory. Proof was right here in front of me. It was the sight of men and women doing honest work, secure in the knowledge that at the end of the day, they would all go home safe. That was the only victory that had ever mattered.